America's destruction of Japan did not begin with the thunder of atomic fire. It began with decades of ambition, pressure, mistrust, and choices that pushed two nations toward a collision neither could step back from. By the mid-20th century, Japan had transformed itself from an isolated archipelago into a rising empire determined to dominate East Asia. Its leaders believed survival depended on expansion, seizing resources, controlling trade routes, and proving itself equal to Western powers that had shaped global order for centuries. As the Japanese military advanced through Manchuria, China, and later Southeast Asia, confidence surged inside Tokyo, but in Washington it triggered growing alarm. America feared that if Japan reshaped Asia through force, the entire balance of power would tilt, threatening U.S. strategic interests, regional stability, and vital supply chains. These tensions hardened when the United States imposed strict economic sanctions, most critically an oil embargo that choked the energy lifeline of Japan's navy and industry. To American leaders, this pressure was a non-violent attempt to halt aggression. To Japan's war planners, it felt like a slow execution. Japan imported nearly all of its oil, and without it, the empire's machinery would collapse within months. Military officials insisted that surrendering ambitions would dishonor the nation and leave it vulnerable to Western domination. They argued that a rapid, decisive strike could cripple American forces long enough for Japan to secure the resources it needed. This mindset, part pride, part fear, pushed Japan toward one of the most consequential decisions in modern history. The attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 was designed to paralyze the U.S. Pacific Fleet. What Japan underestimated was the American response. Far from breaking American resolve, the attack ignited a unified national fury. Factories roared to life, enlistment surged, and the United States committed to a long war on two fronts. Japan had hoped to negotiate from a position of strength. Instead, it awakened a nation with far deeper industrial capacity and broader alliances. The Pacific became a battleground of relentless escalation as the United States slowly pushed across the ocean toward Japan's doorstep. Every island captured came at a terrible cost. Battles at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa revealed the level of resistance Japan was willing to mount. Japanese forces fought with a belief that surrender was worse than death, often choosing suicide over capture. American troops encountered civilians who had been indoctrinated to fear them as monsters, sometimes jumping from cliffs to avoid being taken prisoner. In the air, kamikaze pilots hurled themselves into U.S. ships in a desperate attempt to slow the American advance. Each clash taught U.S. strategists that an invasion of Japan's home islands would not resemble previous campaigns. It would be far bloodier. The casualty estimates soared into the hundreds of thousands for Americans, and into the millions for Japanese civilians forced into last-ditch defense. Inside Japan, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Allied bombing campaigns devastated industrial districts and reduced cities to rubble. Transportation networks collapsed, food supplies dwindled, and disease spread through the population. Yet within the highest levels of government, unity was fracturing. Some leaders recognized that the war was unwinnable and sought terms that would preserve Japan's imperial structure. Hardline military officers rejected any notion of surrender, insisting the country must fight on, believing that if Japan inflicted enough casualties, America might settle for a negotiated peace. This internal struggle created paralysis at the worst possible moment. American intelligence intercepted communications showing Japan preparing civilians, including women and schoolchildren, to fight with bamboo spears, gasoline bombs, and improvised weapons. Whole communities trained for what was called the decisive battle on the homeland. For U.S. generals, this reinforced a chilling reality: if conventional invasion proceeded, urban centers would become vast killing grounds. The United States needed a way to end the war without committing to an operation that could last years and consume countless lives. Meanwhile, a secret project was nearing completion. Deep in American laboratories and desert facilities, scientists had spent years developing a weapon unlike any in human history. The Manhattan Project was a combination of scientific ambition, wartime urgency, and fear that other nations, particularly Germany, might unlock nuclear technology first. By 1945, with Germany defeated, the United States became the sole possessor of a weapon capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. To American leaders, the bomb offered a brutal but effective alternative to invasion. It was seen as a way to force Japan's surrender, demonstrate decisive power, and prevent the Soviet Union from taking larger stakes in Asia as its armies advanced toward Japan's occupied territories. As American forces captured Okinawa and prepared for an invasion of Kyushu, the debate in Washington intensified. Military planners warned that even with overwhelming firepower, Japan's geography and determination could turn the operation into a catastrophe. President Truman, newly in office after Roosevelt's death, inherited a conflict on the edge of spiraling further. He received casualty forecasts so staggering that they threatened the emotional and political stability of the nation. At the same time, Japan refused unconditional surrender, insisting on conditions the Allies rejected. The stalemate made it clear that conventional methods would prolong destruction and suffering. By mid-1945, all paths pointed toward a final, irreversible decision. Japan was cornered but unyielding. America was powerful but exhausted. The world stood at a crossroads where history hinged on choices made in sealed rooms by leaders weighing lives against outcomes. The bomb was ready. Intelligence reports showed Japan had no intention of surrendering. The invasion preparations continued, but the cost loomed like a dark shadow. In that moment of calculation, the trajectory of the war, and of the entire planet, was about to shift into something new, terrifying, and permanent. When President Truman assumed office after Roosevelt's death, he inherited a war racing toward its most violent stage. The battle for Okinawa had shown that Japan would defend every inch of its territory with a ferocity that stunned even seasoned commanders. Thousands of civilians had died alongside soldiers, and intelligence reports predicted that an invasion of Japan's home islands would trigger an even greater disaster. American planners estimated staggering casualties, and the Japanese Defense Ministry prepared for a nationwide final stand that would turn cities, farmlands, and mountain valleys into vast killing zones. Truman faced a decision that would determine not only the fate of the war but the shape of the world that followed. The atomic bomb, created in secrecy by the Manhattan Project, emerged as the most powerful option. Scientists who had spent years building it understood its magnitude but could not anticipate the political and ethical storms it would unleash. Some urged a demonstration on an uninhabited area. Others warned that Japan's leadership might interpret anything less than direct destruction as weakness. American strategists were convinced that only a shock of overwhelming scale could break Japan's resistance and avoid a drawn-out invasion that might claim millions of lives. Adding urgency, the Soviet Union prepared to enter the war against Japan, a development that could alter Asia's post-war map. Truman believed that ending the conflict swiftly was essential to preventing both further bloodshed and a geopolitical confrontation with Moscow. On August 6, 1945, a single American bomber rose into the sky carrying a weapon unlike any used before. The target was Hiroshima, a city selected for its military significance and because previous bombings had left it intact, making the bomb's impact unmistakable. When the device detonated high above the city, an explosion brighter than the sun consumed the heart of Hiroshima in an instant. Entire districts vanished in a blinding flash, and fires swept outward with unimaginable force. The shockwave rippled across miles, leaving behind a vision of devastation the world had never witnessed. Communications broke down, government offices fell silent, and Japan's leadership struggled to comprehend what had happened. Reports filtered in, but the true scale of destruction defied belief. Even after Hiroshima, Japan's governing council remained deadlocked. Hardline military leaders argued that surrender would mean national humiliation and the dissolution of the imperial structure. They believed Japan could still negotiate better terms if it inflicted enough casualties on the Allies when the inevitable invasion came. Other officials, recognizing the futility of continued resistance, sought an end to the war before the empire completely collapsed. The emperor, though aware of Japan's worsening condition, had not yet intervened decisively. As this internal struggle continued, the United States prepared to use its second atomic device. On August 9, the second bomb left American hands. Its original target, Kokura, was obscured by clouds and smoke, so the mission diverted to Nagasaki. Moments later, another immense detonation tore through a valley filled with factories, homes, and hillsides. The landscape transformed within seconds, mirroring the destruction witnessed in Hiroshima. Japan now faced the unmistakable reality that the United States possessed not one but multiple weapons capable of erasing entire cities. The psychological and strategic shock reverberated through the highest levels of government. The argument that Japan could endure long enough to secure favorable terms evaporated. What had been theoretical became undeniable. That same day, the Soviet Union launched its massive invasion of Japanese-held Manchuria. This development shattered what remained of Tokyo's strategic hopes. Japan's leaders had quietly sought Soviet mediation to gain better surrender conditions. Now the Soviet advance made that impossible. Surrounded from all directions and confronted with weapons beyond comprehension, Japan reached a breaking point. The emperor, who had largely remained above direct political conflict, stepped into the debate with unprecedented authority. In a somber meeting, he told his ministers that the continuation of the war would only bring further ruin. He accepted the Allied terms, with one condition: that Japan could preserve the imperial institution, even if stripped of its wartime power. His words ended years of division at the top and left the militarists without grounds to continue their resistance. However, even after this decision, an attempted coup erupted as hardline officers tried to prevent the surrender announcement from being broadcast. They failed, and Japan moved toward the moment that would end its most devastating chapter. On August 15, the emperor addressed his nation through radio for the first time in history. His voice, formal and subdued, informed millions that Japan would accept the Allied terms. Listeners across the country reacted with shock, grief, and disbelief. After years of propaganda declaring that surrender was impossible, citizens confronted a new reality. The war was over, and their nation had been defeated with weapons capable of annihilating entire cities. American forces soon arrived to oversee the occupation. Instead of brutal retribution, they initiated sweeping reforms, dismantling the militarist system, rewriting the constitution, and guiding Japan toward a new political identity rooted in pacifism and economic revival. The world, too, entered a new era. The atomic bombings marked the beginning of the nuclear age, introducing weapons with the capacity to end civilization. Nations worldwide recognized the stakes of this new power, triggering an arms race that defined global politics for decades. Debate over the necessity and morality of the bombs persisted long after the war. Some argued they prevented an invasion that might have caused far greater loss of life. Others believed diplomatic alternatives were not given enough time. Regardless of perspective, the bombings reshaped international relations, military strategy, and humanity's understanding of its own destructive capabilities. Japan's defeat closed one of the deadliest wars in history, but it opened a chapter defined by caution, fear, and the recognition that another conflict on that scale could mean the end of the world. The moment the bombs fell, the world crossed a threshold it could never step back from. The day the war ended was also the day humanity understood the true weight of its power.